Good morning. We have an opportunity to redefine what it means to experience a limitation. We have the Ace of Pentacles, the Queen of Cups, who I've covered up with a little painter's tape, and the Three of Wands in reverse. Now I want to start off with why I covered her up with painter's tape. And it's because there are limitations when it comes to uploading content on certain platforms. Okay. Now, one thing I could have done is just not use the deck, right? And there's another deck that I have that also has some nudity in it. But I was like, let me not use it because I don't feel like going through the trouble of potentially getting in issues. But it's like, wait a minute. You see how there's an easy solution here? Just cover over some painter's tape. Now, deep down, I don't think we should need to cover up normal human body parts, right? And also, this is art, correct? But I also understand that my content is being filtered through a system. My content is being filtered through the space I'm choosing to upload it on, okay? All right? So I'm going to adhere to the rules, adhere to the restrictions, so that the main thing, the priority, the message gets out. Because the reality is, like, I was hesitant to use the deck at first, but I was like, there's a reason I grabbed it. I didn't feel compelled to use any other deck. So instead of getting in that way, I found a way around it. So I wanted to start off with that. But the next thing that I want to move into is how, like, these cards are truly presenting themselves to give us a chance to redefine what it means to be limited, okay? The Three of Wands in reverse, essentially what it's showing us is that there's no movement right now. There's a restriction of movement, or there's no movement right now. Why? Because I feel this Ace of Pentacles is operating as a governing body. Okay, a very powerful force, but let's keep moving with a governing body, okay? And I want us to pay attention to the relationship that is existing here between these two, because they're looking at each other. They're looking at each other. We do have one that is kind of moving in two different directions because of the S shape of her figure, right? But we do have a connection here where they are at least pointed in each other's direction, okay? And what I want to first talk about is, again, like a larger system at play. And the fact that we have a masculine figure on this Ace of Pentacles that is also looking towards the very blunt physicality of the Queen of Cups. Full display, full expression of self, full body experience. And if there's a relationship going on, that means that this is what we're providing to one another. There's a full body experience, and I mean like fully immersed sensory experience, okay? In exchange for what? A coin? You see, all we can see about this coin is one side, so this might even be considered surface level, right? What's being provided for this exchange here? Again, if we're redefining limitation, if that's the topic of this trio today, that means that there's been an observation of imbalance, but what we're noticing is the inability to move forward, right? Why? Well, you see how we have some restrictions here. There's been more information, right? From, like, let's say, especially with this ancient coin, like historians have been talking about what happens to societies, cultures, civilizations, whenever there are restrictions on femininity, on the feminine body, on the more feminine traits, right? What happens to this? It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot moving forward, right? Because upright, this Three of Wands can be talking about the observation of the exchange, the input, that output, whether you can see where the output is. There's that beyond the boundary, right? Ooh, ooh, not so much here. This could be an awareness and even talking about what happens, because you can even see it. There may even be some sense of polarity that's going on here. Because that coin it's just moving in one direction. It's just moving towards this feminine body. And really what it's presented, it's a resource. And the resource is pointing at what it defines to be resource. But do you also see how the resource is leaning towards the cup? Cups also represent spirituality. And do you see how she's in an S shape? Her body is in that S shape. She's moving towards that coin, but she's also hanging on to that cup. The water can also talk about instinct, or how the senses, there's not just 5, there's a 6th that some call intuition. There might be some polarizing conversations around expression of particular human forms. What happens when we do this to specific bodies? Because while I've been focusing on femininity, right, in the female form, what happens when we are not adhering to those rules? What happens when gender fluidity comes in? What happens when we start talking about eugenics? What happens there? For some of us, we understand that when we are engaging with the system, it does require us to participate in certain ways. But we are actually leaning into a much deeper understanding of what's going on here. Because I need to touch on the air of codependency before I start leaning into a very detailed list of like health and political and relationship examples that I'm pulling from this, okay? What I want to talk about is the codependency that I'm seeing here, because you see how this masculine energy is surrounded by these 4 roses? This system where this governing body has inherently more power, but is always pointed at the resource that looks like the human body here, maybe a specific kind of body, right? It's dependent. It's completely dependent on what the Queen of Cups has to offer. It's totally dependent on this. In fact, it may even, as we know, there's certain systems that may say we have to restrict certain understandings of spirituality. Meanwhile, they might be practicing the same craft that they hid away for themselves. So what's interesting about this dynamic here is that we can see that there is this potential coddling that these 4 roses can present, because there's a total codependence on particular types of bodies. And that might be what like historians are picking up, or even the statistics have been showing, or what's been told in the tales from our ancestors, the orators. They've been telling us, whenever we do something like this, we don't move forward. Whenever we possibly hoard all the comfort for ourselves, we don't move forward. We hoard all the resources and the resources that provide us comfort. We do all that. We don't move forward as a collective, because now I'm starting to see the nature of import and export in 3 of Wands. But when it's in reverse, what's going on with that economy? What could potentially put so much restrictions on that flow, on that path, to the point that it's actually not even, it's barely functional? and experiencing the results of that. And again, going back to redefining what it means to experience a limitation, those of you who have struggled, you've been prepared for this. And you know what that means. You know what that means. Now, I want to get into the part of the reading where there's like a lot of examples that are popping up from these cards here. And I want to start with health, okay? The obvious thing here is that we could be talking about some form of a blocker through like medication, right? Because this could be like a pill, right? And look at that. It's a lot of, I mean, this is the Lioness Oracle deck. This is my like number one. This and the Anima Mundi deck, they're both number one for me. These are my favorite decks, right? So it's very feminine. It's many depictions of fertility, right? So leaning into that, this could be talking about something like birth control, right? But also, if it's not just like a blocker that is birth control, this could be like SSRIs, okay? Because the SSRIs, it might be talking about how helping us, you know, mitigate or mediate for certain health responsibilities, okay? So blocking certain things with what we could be consuming. We could be looking at like over-the-counters medications, or what's behind a pharmacist or a chemist's you know, desks, really. We might be looking at the medication, but again, remember, with this Three of Wands in reverse, if we're looking at availability of resources or ingredients, how to procure them, we might even be looking at the restrictions around what's available anymore. Production might have been halted. Production or even availability of the product, it might be held somewhere. And so there could be delays around receiving access to certain medications. Possibly even certain like man-made forms of assistance, like a cane, a walker, chairs. I also see something about the, like, you know, the chair that you can attach to the wall so that you can sit on it and go up the stairs, the electric, that electric lift. I see that, especially with the sinewy position, that S shape there, kind of moving in two different directions. I feel like leaning on to something might be of importance here, even if it's temporary. There's, I think, conversations around some form of external assistance and getting constant access to it. But it could be even like the pricing around it could affect the availability. Some of us might, because of these limitations regarding money or availability, we might be looking at more natural forms of medicine. So looking at more medicinal herbs, visiting more apothecaries, learning more about natural ways to heal, okay? And possibly in tandem with what you're currently doing, okay? I'm also getting, okay, if we're gonna go to like consumption here, because I talked about taking pills, but also input, output, right? We may have been feeling like a blockage in our colon. Because if there's a blockage of flow, like fluidity, right? Maybe it has something to do with not drinking, like maybe dehydration or not drinking enough water. It's okay if you have to put down some money to go to like urgent care, to go get examined, or invest a little bit of money. Like, your health is important. So if you are feeling blocked, if you're noticing that you're like constipated, I think it's like, I feel like I'm talking to some heavy coffee drinkers here. If things are not flowing right, we may have to restrict the amount of whatever liquid that we're consuming, okay? And then speaking of restriction of liquids, I'm getting something with like sugars, and I'm hearing like age, something with age here, and like the wisdom teeth. if we're consuming a lot of product, we might be, why did those two come together? Wisdom teeth is one thing. We might just need to get them removed, okay? Because they might be causing some complications. The other thought that was blending together with that was if there might be something that we're consuming a lot of that is affecting the quality of our teeth, okay? So dental repair, dental work, all right? And we may be experiencing restriction by way of needing to get a referral and then having to go through the process again. That's another thing I heard there. Diets are another thing. We could be, again, kind of going back to the like dental sugar. We might be reducing that. Could be reducing how much we're consuming there. Some of us also are just really holding back on consuming a lot of a substance. Maybe it's that, right? Or it's just making sure that, because we know our family history, we're not going to even open ourselves up to, walking down that path or having that kind of story again or at all. What else do I have coming up here? Very obvious ones. Breast exams, mammograms. We could be, maybe there's a bump or a lump that we're feeling. Could even be something going on with our lymph nodes that are popping up here. Okay, but it could be kind of seizing you like, oh gosh, what's going on? And also like with the mammograms getting older, usually by the time we hit 40, we need to regularly start getting those mammograms, right? So there could be examinations that are going on around up here that have been concerning us. Breathe. Okay. Also, when it comes to because we have like sonograms, but also like ultrasounds and like maybe even transvaginal ultrasounds. You see how hold on to here? We may be restricted by having to fast, so not eat for a period of time, maybe like 3 hours at least. And then we have to like consume a liquid. Sometimes it's like drink a lot of water so that they can do the examination, okay? Maybe it creates a lot of discomfort, okay, but it's like there might be a procedure where you have to follow it like that, and you just have to, this is what you have to do for your health, okay? Sometimes you have to drink a liquid that turns like your like your excretions a certain color, and having to do something for a specific exam. We might also be looking at like invasive procedures. Birth control, again, is an obvious one, but like an invasive form of birth control would be IUDs, because that's considered surgical. Side dish, some of y'all are getting piercings. And you will be restricted regarding movement for some time, depending on where you get them. I'm just saying. All right. Okay. The last couple of things I'm getting is like, yeah, we're looking at something like hysterectomy or sterilization, or even like getting the tubes tied or like vasectomies. That's again popping up here. It looks like the appointment might be made, or you might be getting the opportunity to finally make the appointments. This could even be the recovery period already. Okay. Is that all I'm getting for health? Yes. Okay, now let's move on to the, if this is looking at more, let's kind of go back to disabilities, because I'm hearing like ADA compliance. And I mentioned surface level, so like interface. So in my, for my day job, I work in IT, okay? So interfaces is more of my field. It might be something to do with like some form of like something like ADA compliance, and what really restricts like the mobility of certain users, color blindness, or the ability for those who are blind users, or those who are hard of hearing. We might be looking at the restrictions around very specific interfaces, not even just with technology though. It could be like in a space that you even live, maybe you are noticing that when it comes to health, if you see like you might need to use a chair for a period of time, but there's no ramp. There's no ramp to get in and out of maybe your building. You're noticing things like that. And maybe there's restrictions around how you can even care for yourself because these weren't considered in the environment, which is like a local concern, right? Which then would naturally start bleeding out to more of the larger governing bodies. But those who are disabled, whether it's visible or invisible, I do feel like a lot of you are in a place to where you're trying to, I think, here's what I'm getting. You're trying to like depolarize yourself from being totally dependent on a system that you may feel is failing you, or a system that you feel like is not totally reliant upon, or maybe because in a timely manner, right? And because of that, I'm hearing third spaces, or the awareness that there's a lack of a third space, right? You see the lack of third spaces. You might be, let me say this, I don't think you're looking for it. Either it already exists or you know it's in here. You know for it to be created, it has to come in here. But it might just be up here. Take it in here. Or it's just going to stay an idea. Find a way to move that down into this brain center that actually processes it and projects that dream out into reality. That ability to create your own, despite, like, redefine the limitations by creating your own space. Now, the thing about trying to depolarize yourself is that you may still need some access to resources, and it may still be through familiar channels, but that doesn't need to stop you from crafting your own cup to fill here. The limitation is the permission you give yourself. Okay? What else am I getting? I also see many people like who are typically told, like, because I talked about creating your own space, but if there's also depolarizing, that means that those, you still can integrate or exist in those typical spaces as well, but there's like a twist on it. So for instance, let me use an example of like modeling, right? Plus size modeling was like, wow, right? But like even like Victoria's Secrets, like there was like getting a plus size model on like that annual show, I'm forgetting the name of the show, where they have the Victoria's Secret angels that come out, that Victoria's Secret whatever show, that like having a plus size model come out. But then like, what if it was a disabled model, right? Like breaking into those spaces, kind of depolarizing in that way. That's what I just got a vision of, because I feel like for some of you, it's about breaking that mold, but you're also focused on investing and making sure that there's not always this need to break the mold. You're creating a space for it. So as a part of you that's not forgetting your practice, it's not forgetting your spirituality or what you're emotionally tied to, which some people would say is your religious practice. Whatever you're emotionally invested in is your religious practice. That's what I say. So you don't forget yourself in the process of still trying to connect with, but also decenter, so that whatever was considered a limitation, you feel empowered by it, not disempowered by it. So I do see like some of y'all existing in competitive spaces where you don't feel typical, okay? Where you don't feel typical. And it does require, in some instances, hiding some vulnerabilities. It might be for safety purposes, okay? But I do feel that you also know that when you're navigating through many areas, that it's not necessary for you to share all of yourself all at once. No matter how much, like how big or powerful that energy is. You don't need to be bullied. You don't need to be bullied into a corner. You can't be, is what I'm hearing. Because if this is the corner and there's an energy that's trying to bully you, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work, because you see how, if this is you here, you see how you have a rose, And the roses surrounding this potential bullying energy, that connection, that resonance is not going to allow for these roses to continue to comfort and support the image or whatever this governing force, this bullying power, this, or maybe even a person is. This could be actual support coming from these flowers that have been surrounded by or have had to be around in the same environment as whatever this, whatever that Ace of Pentacles is projecting in that story. Okay, so I think I'm going to end it there. Oh, I lied. One more thing. If the Ace of Pentacles is operating as Mother Nature, if it's operating as Mother Nature, it might be creating actual restrictions when it comes to how resources can get to and fro, and the vulnerabilities of what's necessary. You might be paying a lot of attention to that, or you might be deeply affected by what's going on right now. And with Mother Nature, in water, there's been a lot of, I think a lot of flooding that's been going on. I know with Texas, but I think also India, there was a recent event that happened when it came to Mother Nature doing that. And I feel like I'm bringing that up because if we go back to spirituality for a moment, I think many of you might be in a place to where you're correlating the treatment of like Mother Earth and what we're experiencing with that kind of decentering, that course correcting that's going on here. You might be seeing a correlation between that, what you're feeling, what you're witnessing, any premonitions, and then connecting that with the data that actually does exist here, because that could actually be the two different directions that we're being pulled in. Okay, you know your body, you know what you're feeling, and if you don't know what you're feeling, pause, sense the pressure, and just allow. The way that we allow flow to come back through us is breathe. Do what you instinctively know how to do. Okay, whether it's full exposure or there are parts of you that you've got to cover, breathe. Okay, so I'm gonna officially end that here. And those of you who are in any dire need of resources, I do intend that you're able to get help, because I did just mention natural resource and like disaster relief, right? I do intend that you are able to reach out and do ask for help. Do ask for help if you're feeling vulnerable right now. Put it out there, put it online that you need help from people, right? And there are people who are out there who will resonate with that message, and they will have resources to offer you, okay? They will help you get your life started again, even when it's been put on a huge pause, right? Okay, and while I mentioned that for natural disasters, that can happen for anything, okay? Any subject in your life where you need help, ask for help for you. Do that for you, okay? So I love you very much. I thank you for joining me. I intend that this was helpful, and I hope that you felt seen. Got a longer reading today. But either way, I appreciate any time you've spent. And if you have any questions or have any comments, go ahead and leave them. I read them all. And I look forward to reading and channeling for you next time. Bye-bye.